Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today for our webinar on CAD RMS transitions. My name is Doug Shoemaker and I'm a public safety executive here at Peregrine. Just a little bit about me. I was in policing a little over 33 years in 3 different police agencies, 2 of those serving as the chief of police. And in that time, I had a lot of different things to do at work, and some of those included technology acquisition. And so I'm really pleased to be here with you today to talk about this particular topic. We've got some unbelievable panelists today who have been so gracious with their time to talk about a topic that's becoming really increasingly relevant across law enforcement, and not just within policing, but also certainly extends to public safety partners in fire, EMS, 911 dispatch, and emergency management. And so let's talk CAD RMS transitions. If you've been a part of one of these transitions, or maybe you have one in front of you, you know exactly how much time, thought, consideration, coordination, planning goes into this process. And there are so many elements that can truly make or break a transition. So it's important to equip your department with the tools, the knowledge, the support to ensure that that transition really goes as smoothly as possible. Today, our panelists are going to share some really valuable lessons learned on how to get that transition right the first time. So before I introduce the panelists, I want to go through a couple of housekeeping items that I really want to make you aware of. You should see on the right-hand side of your screen the opportunity to engage in the chat feature. We really want you to engage and do that throughout the webinar. Ask your questions, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, share your own experiences. All those types of things can certainly be thrown in the chat, and we encourage that. We really want to hear from you. We've also got a Q&A section where you can ask your questions of the panelists. We'll take about roughly 10 minutes of time at the end of the webinar to address those particular questions. So next, you're going to see a poll that should pop up on your screen in just a moment. We're going to do 2 different polls to get a better understanding really of who's on today's call. It should be helpful for our panelists to see kind of who the mix of folks are on the call itself, so then they can tailor their remarks to whomever we have watching today. Natalie Blundell, who works with me with Peregrine, is just off stage, and she's going to throw the poll up. Natalie, great, thanks for that. We want to know who you are, so you can see some options there. This is our first poll, whether you're a sworn law enforcement officer, no matter what rank, civilian or professional staff agency employee, fire rescue, any rank again, 911 dispatch, emergency management, you're a vendor, or in the undecided category, or something else that's not fitting into that poll. We just ask you choose which of those options best describes your role. And as you can, we can see the results actually already coming in now. And in just a few moments, we will close that poll. Looks like we've got a lot of professional staff members and sworn law enforcement so far, and a few others here and there, but we'll give it just another moment as the poll finishes up. Really appreciate you taking the time to do that. So Natalie, when we have a minute, can you put the results up on the screen for everybody to see? It looks like we have primarily policing agency folks here in here, kind of a good mix of sworn and administrative professional staff members. So that's really great for our panelists to know. Thanks for engaging in that. The second poll we have is we really want to know what stage of a CAD RMS transition process that you're currently going through at this time. And that can be several different parts of this. So this poll, when it comes up, is going to ask you where you are in that process and really why you've joined this. And that poll should give you the options. Natalie, if you can throw that up for me, please. That'll show that you either haven't started the poll or the process yet, or you're considering a change to a new CAD RMS system, that maybe you're currently in that RFP stage, which is always a lot of fun. You've already selected a vendor as the third option, or you're in the midst of a transition already, or you're just listening and just want to be a fly on the wall and curious about really what this is all about. And there could be maybe some folks that are that might not be in any of these levels, but still have an interest in the conversation. So as that populates as well too, looks like it's actually a great variety of everybody throughout the entire process. It's almost oddly exactly even across the board. So that's helpful, because today when we do this, we're going to go through all those different aspects from start to finish, lessons learned, and some things to look out for. So thanks for that. It looks like we really do have a good mix of people. So again, thanks for participating. So enough with the polls. Let's get to the main part of the discussion. This is the stuff that you came here for and took time out of your day for, after all, right? So I've been in been down this road several times myself throughout my career, and have been a part of several CAD RMS transitions. And there have been, we'll say, opportunities and challenges along the road, some bumps in the road too. It's super frustrating when it goes awry, and it's frustrating not only to me or to you, but to everyone involved in that transition. These are widespread agency changes that really affect the entire organization, and they have major implications: costs, time, data access, all the things. There's a lot involved. This is not a small task. So our goal today is really to talk to you about things to look for as you contemplate a move, what your needs are, why you're transitioning, what you're looking for in a vendor or vendors, and how to navigate this just as smoothly as possible. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce our panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Major Justin Ross of the Pasco County Sheriff's Office in Florida. Major Ross is currently in his 20th year with the Pasco County Sheriff's Office. He started with the agency as a volunteer police explorer and has risen through the ranks to his current rank of major, working in just about every area of the agency along the way. Currently, he oversees the Operational Logistics Bureau, which encompasses IT, fleet, purchasing, facilities, quite a bit of things there. Major Ross also served as the project manager for their recent RMS transition. Major, welcome aboard today. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and share our experiences with everybody.
We look forward to it. Again, thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Chief Brian Bubar of the San Pablo, California Police Department. San Pablo PD, interestingly enough, was actually Peregrine's very first customer. And when building Peregrine, our founders actually embedded themselves at San Pablo PD to fully really live and breathe through the agency's pain points, data challenges, and needs. Chief Bubar spent his entire career, 23 years, with San Pablo PD and has risen through the ranks to become the chief of police. He also oversaw the development and implementation of a comprehensive public safety technology program in San Pablo. 2021, Chief Bubar oversaw the police department's RFP procurement process for a CAD RMS transition. Chief, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Doug. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Finally, last but not least, I want to introduce one of my colleagues here at Peregrine, Eric Wood. Eric spent 15 years as an enterprise architect at Microsoft, managing large-scale infrastructure migrations and security solutions for Fortune 100 businesses worldwide prior to assuming the role of police technology manager, and then later as smart technology officer for the city of Chula Vista. He served as the director of ARGIS in San Diego County prior to joining Peregrine, where he now leads information security, compliance, and IT. Eric, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Doug. It's a very important conversation. I'm happy to be part of it.
Great. Awesome panelists. We are excited about this conversation. So we're excited to have you all here, and let's just dive right in and start with our first question. So I'm going to ask each one of you this question as well. And I'll start with you, Major Ross. The question is this: in your experience, what is something that you've taken away from a CAD RMS transition that you've been a part of in your career? Like, what stands out in that process for you? Again, Major, can you start us?
Absolutely. So it is such a massive undertaking. So I think there's a couple things that that come to mind, right? So one is never underestimate the size of the project. I think it's perhaps one of the most consequential decisions that you can make from a process and a procedure for your department, right? It drives the backbone of many law enforcement organizations, which is patrol, and then your law enforcement investigation. So it's very, very huge. So don't underestimate it. Make sure that you put in the amount of effort and energy that it needs and deserves. The other thing is getting the right people involved. I know we're going to talk about that later, so I will leave it there, but it's a must to have the right people on the right team. Selecting the right vendor is important. I saw, many people are in that process or have just selected a vendor. For us, it's the design of the product and then ultimately customer service. Customer service is huge, right? I think, to leave specific vendors out, but talk a little bit about the private sector, right? It's the reason why Chick-fil-A is so successful. You see them build it and everybody wraps around those buildings, 3 times over. And it may not be the best chicken sandwich, although it could be up for debate, but it's the customer service that keeps bringing people back. And I think the same is true. So customer service is really important in that. And then last is just remain flexible and open-minded. This is a process, a journey and process as well. So you should take a look at this from continuous process improvement. It's also, an opportunity for you to change the way that you've always done things. I know that's change is the forbidden word in law enforcement. We hate change and we hate the way things are, but it is that great opportunity to take a look at what and how you do things in your organization. Don't get stuck in the way that you've always done things, and understand how the technology works for the vendor that you've selected them. The bottom line is you've selected that vendor, you've selected the product. Sometimes fighting the technology is going to make the process a lot harder and make the implementation harder and how your officers experience the product. So not only having the vendor learn your processes, but understanding how the technology gets developed in a certain way, right? It works a certain way. They've developed it with a thought process of how things are going to flow. So you are going to have to be adaptable. Don't fight the technology.
Yeah, great points and fantastic. I love what you said about customer service. We'll come back to that because I definitely want to touch on that. That's super important. Chief Bubar, if you wouldn't mind following up again, something you've taken away that's been significant. What stands out with that CAD RMS transition?
Yeah, well, I echo everything that Major Ross said. Certainly relevant. And for us, the biggest thing for us was the data, how we use data. So like oftentimes we approach these RFPs and the RMS CAD transitions, and there's a lot of capability out there. There's a lot of developing technology, and I liken it to showing up to a buffet hungry, right? There's so much out there that you think all of it is going to fit and shape how you do your workflow within your department. And the one thing that I found was true was that we as an agency need to decide what is our workflow, what works for us, what are our priorities, because every department is unique. Every department has different priorities. Every community has different priorities. So identifying and staying true to that while being open to new technology, new ways of doing business. But for us, like seeing how sometimes the technology is limiting, right? These CAD RMS, we experienced this in our previous legacy system. We created a workflow around the limitations of our RMS system. And so to take a step back and understand what is it that we're trying to accomplish, how does this RMS system that we're thinking about getting, how's it going to support our initiatives, our priorities? And then what are our ways to fill the gaps? Because every CAD RMS vendor, they will want to be the full suite. They will want to offer the full suite experience. We're going to be able to solve A to Z, and here's all of the features. But keep in mind, all of this technology wasn't actually developed with your specific agency in mind. So what you'll end up doing, and what we did, was biting off more than we could chew, right? If you go back to that buffet metaphor, and you end up spending a lot of time and money on things that may not necessarily fit, but having the right people in the room to give that input on the front end is going to be critical. So understand your workflow, understand what you're trying to accomplish, and then what are the plans to support that transition post implementation.
I've never heard the comparison to a buffet before, but I will tell you, I will steal that moving forward, because looking back on my own experiences, that's precisely what it's like. You have all these things in front of you. So yeah, that's great. Fantastic points. We'll circle back to some of those too as the webinar continues on. Thanks, Chief. Eric, something that stood out in a CAD RMS transition that you've experienced and been a part of.
Yeah, thank you. Start off with, I'm not sure I can finish out this trifecta of restaurant analogies, so I might stray from that. But basically, the kind of key takeaway, as I recall back to those experiences, is that at first glance, a CAD or RMS transition would appear as though it's a technology project. And that's actually not the case. It's an organizational change opportunity, a catalyst, if you will, to really to address and follow up on some of the points from Major Ross and Chief Bubar, is that the practices the agency has implemented and runs day in, day out were largely a result of decisions made at the last CAD or RMS migration. And either it could have been a derivative of limitations of those products and decisions that were made by the stakeholders at that time. This is the opportunity to change those and really revisit how should we operate? What is the reason why we do what we do the way we do it? And so in selecting the right kind of project manager, project leadership team, both in the agency, but also from the vendor, you have to interview them, make sure they're on the same page as you, is making sure you're not just kind of following, well, this is the way we've always done it. Because the reason why you may have always done that is because of some product limitation in the past. This is a chance to get the right leadership that's open to change, the right kind of change, and to implement it with this new solution. Technology is actually easy when you got good competent vendor, good competent internal team. Technology is not the big challenge here. It's organizational change and doing that successfully.
Yeah, great points. So let's talk about the thing, and I think it's been said before, and not just in this particular meeting, but elsewhere multiple times. But cops hate change, but then they hate things when they don't change either. So moving to a new system it's a massive undertaking. So there has to be a reason why that you want to embark on this, because it's not cheap. It's a long-term investment. It's a massive change organizationally. So I think my second question really focuses around that why component as to why did you want to embark upon this new transition anyway? Like what was the impetus for this move to a new system specifically? What took you to that point where you're like, we need to do something different, and here we go, kind of thing. Talk about that a little bit. And Chief Bubar, I want to start with you on that one, particularly from your perspective in San Pablo.
Yeah, so for us, we had been using a legacy system that was antiquated and was no longer being supported or updated. So the change was compelling in that sense. I would say that using that system over time and experiencing kind of the limitations of accessing data, which led us to our relationship with Peregrine early on. I was tired of hacking my own RMS system to pull data. And the thing that I learned was that the data integration component is very, very difficult. We're just cops. I'm just a cop. I don't have a background in engineering or analysis like that. But to me, it's simple. I want this information. I need it timely. I need it. It needs to be accessible, and I need it to get. It needs to have value. It needs to be tangible for not only our officers responding to a critical incident, but our community. And the system that we had did not speak to that. So that led to our relationship and a lot of the development that we saw with Peregrine to support that, and informed us going into the RFP, because we needed an updated RMS system that could support the NIBRS, in California, CYBRS NIBRS transition. So there was some regulatory requirements that we needed to speak to, but really accessing data and figuring out a way to make that tangible and valuable. And then because we had the relationship with Peregrine, it also supported that RFP transition in what we looked at and how we could supplement the way we view data with this new transition through Peregrine.
Great, thank you for that. It's a difficult thing to look at your old legacy systems and figure out how you're going to get something new that's really going to work for you. So thanks for bringing that perspective. Major Ross, what was the why for your organization when you embarked upon that journey?
Yeah, so it was kind of the perfect storm, and a lot of the like Chief Bubar said, right? A lot of agencies will go out looking for a new solution, right? If you go ask the vast majority of agencies across America, I don't think you'll find anybody that's overly ecstatic with their vendor. But again, it's technology, right? We just find ourselves at the battle with technology. So I think that's normal. But we weren't. We kind of were, idle, standing by, looking to see, hey, when do we make this switch? We know we're going to have to make a switch. And then obviously our last vendor had the particular product that we were on, they were going to transition away from that for a newer product. So that was kind of, although it wasn't end of life, it wasn't not that it wasn't supported, but they weren't going to continue to build that product out. So I think that was kind of the impetus that put us out there to start looking for it. In addition, our CIO at the time was in this push to the cloud to try to get everything into the cloud. And that actually became one of our requirements when we went out looking for a new vendor, was that whatever solution that we were choosing, we wanted that to be in the cloud. So it's definitely it's not an overnight decision, right? There's a lot of things that go into that, and I don't think there is a perfect solution out there. We've talked about, everybody wants to be able to do everything, and you have to look at what are the pieces that you are struggling with or unhappy with the most. And in particular for our transition, we ended up this time around only making the switch in RMS. We stayed with the vendor for CAD and the mobile solution. So then that, to Chief Bubar's point, becomes even more critical that we get vendors, if you don't have the capabilities in your own agency, to make sure that you can integrate all of these systems together in as seamless of a environment that you possibly can, so you don't put issues out to your end users that don't need any more struggles to operate in the current environment that our law enforcement officers do. So
yeah, great, thank you. And no, this is not an overnight decision. It's not even close. And if it is, then you're probably going to end up with some challenges, I would imagine. So thank you for that perspective. Eric, close us out on this CAD RMS transitions. What have you seen? What have you experienced in terms of the why to make a change?
Yeah, for both the CAD and RMS transitions I've been through, in each case, they happen to be the established kind of legacy platform for over 15 years, which is a pretty long time for an agency to stay on a single platform. So in that time, they just don't stay current because this resistance to change, and also some technical debt and other things that may collect over the years from the vendor or from the agency not wanting to accept certain updates on a certain cadence. So there's certainly that. For example, we didn't have, and it became, officer safety issues and kind of how we manage our efficiency. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, things. So, for example, we didn't have ABL. That was pretty important. But 15 years prior, that really wasn't a thing. It wasn't a common practice. Maybe in top tier platforms, which was not what we were running at the time. So you don't have ABL, you don't have mobile apps, which again, 15 years prior was not a thing. And you're sure the vendor could have released those updates, but again, they tend not to change dramatically and keep current. That's why we do with change. It's that impetus of saying, okay, I now need to go to another echelon of product, and staying on the same product just doesn't seem to get you there for whatever reason. It's just a true thing. I think resistance to change. So there's the technical debt and staleness of the technology for one thing. And I mentioned a couple of examples, but there's also the environmental changes, such as, open data and open governance wasn't really a thing 15 years prior either. And now there's really an expectation of dashboards and liveness of data and richness of it. And also NIBRS reporting had completely transformed in that time frame. And so just coaxing the data in a useful way out of these platforms was an afterthought, if thought of at all. And so the new platforms really was ability to address some of these needs and gaps and allow the agencies to better manage their operational efficiency and effectiveness for the community. So those are the kind of two, areas I'd say were key drivers for our impetus to move forward to a new platform.
Yeah, so I'm picking up from each of you and having experienced it myself. I think we can safely say that a CAD RMS transition is not a simple task that's just assigned to somebody, get it done. There are more things that go into this. This is a very complex thing. So when you look at that CAD RMS transition that you've experienced, who came to the table within your organization, your agency, to really talk how this would play out and what the goals were? So it wasn't, Chief Bubar, it wasn't just you saying, oh, we're going to do a CAD RMS transition, I'm going to pick one and off we go. most likely there were people at the table where you've talked that through to vet things. Did you have I guess my question is, did you have like a project manager? Who was that role assigned to? And who all came to the table specifically from your agency to start looking through this? I'm going to actually start with you, Major Ross, on this one.
Sure. So it kind of goes in phases, right? So, as you mentioned, at first there has to be executive buy-in, right? So I think that, it started with having some conversations with the sheriff and, talking to him about the challenges that we face and getting the buy-in to say, hey, yes, it actually is time to pull the trigger. And then you also need the executive buy-in to make sure that you can get the right people to the table. Sometimes depending on, although you may assign, a project manager, which in our case, is me, but you may not be able to make sure that although you start to bring people to the project, that they are putting forth the right amount of effort and have the right sense of urgency that is necessary to successfully carry out this project. So, from there, it transitioned to the initial kind of procurement and making sure that we had the right vendor selected. So from a project manager, me from an operational perspective and understanding the law enforcement operations, we had our CFO involved and our CIO involved, understanding the technology and making sure it's going to be a right fit for all of the knowledge and expertise that we have for all the members in IT and our software teams and all of that stuff to make sure that it fits, the solution fits us. We have to make sure that the dollars make sense and that we are going to be able to afford and sustain this and have the understanding. You'd be surprised, or maybe not, depending on your level of the organization, but you'd be surprised the amount of organizational knowledge your CFO has and what benefits and conversations that they could bring to the table about why we've done things previously in the past, depending on how long you've been at your level of command in the agency. So there were some very beneficial conversations there. But once we were ready to pull the trigger, we transitioned to more of an operational team. And that's where you need to start bringing in the subject matter experts. And for us, we looked at it as we separate report management and records. We look at it as two different things. Obviously, Florida has very open public records laws. So responding to public records requests, especially being a former live PD agency, the amount of attention that you get from the public, we get all kinds of stuff. So that's a department in its own. So report management for us are the ones that do focus on NIBRs and the quality control of reports and making sure everything is done. And quite honestly, it is their product, right? They're the owners of that. So making sure that they're going to be able to keep up with that and the backlog that potentially could present, making sure that they're engaged was really important. And then the other point that we looked at it was our deputies and first line supervisors, because they're going to be the end users. We need to get a solution that's going to work for them and make their jobs easier. At the end of the day, that's what technology is all about, is working for the members, not us working to sustain and support that technology. So depending on whatever the task was at hand throughout the process, that kind of made up the key process, the key group that involved us. It really is good. That project manager is very key to make sure that you select the right person. It is somebody that has to have a knack for process. They need to understand the why you do things and have a global understanding of how processes impact different units across the agency. You can't be myopically focused on just what patrol does, right? You can go and craft the best system for your patrol officers or frontline supervisors, but your agency could crumble in the back end of it. So you really need to make sure you have a good cross section of the agency and a strong leader that is able to understand why you guys do what you need to do and all of the processes in your agency so you can make those decisions.
Great. Thank you. A lot of fantastic points there. And Eric, I want to take it to you before I go to Chief Bubar. So tell me who was involved in the process, like same kind of concept as to what the major said, but specifically from your recollection, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so it was important, I think crucial. I attribute a lot of the success of the project to the fact that we had a really kind of magnanimous leader that, while technical, more technical than most, it was a lieutenant actually at the agency. But while technical, it was really more important that they be able to make decisions based on the outcomes. What are the outcomes the agency really needs from this? Not listen too much. You got to listen to everybody, but not let the technical leader, the subject matter expert on the CAD or RMS side, really kind of be the decision leader or project manager. That will kind of not lead to the outcomes that you're looking for. It'll lead to addressing their pain points that they've had with the product in the past. And so they'll be overly weighting those considerations versus properly overly weighting the agency's desired outcomes. So a really strong leader that made sure all voices were heard, but when there are competing priorities, someone who can make a decision with the right motivations. Similarly, and I would say equally important, is to make sure that that person's peer from the agency side, the agency project manager or key sponsor, is absolutely an advocate for the agency's success, not the vendor's success. And it is possible to find that. That was not the first resource we have from the vendor leading the vendor side of the project. We had to make personnel changes, and then we found that person. They advocated for the agency internally to make sure we got the resources when we need them. Problems were solved quickly, not next month, to keep everything on schedule and in scope. The contract will leave many things unspoken for, unwritten, the statement of work, things like that. You can only cover so much. So you need someone who understands the important thing here is the right outcomes, the right result for the agency. And if that's achieved, everybody wins. And so you can't treat it like a transactional thing. Oh, that's a change order. That's this. You didn't say that. We don't have to do this. It's really about, are you a partner or are you a vendor? We needed a partner. And so once we made that change, we were sailing, and it was a great success as a result of those two leadership positions. So I can't emphasize those enough.
Great, thank you. Chief, I want to ask you last, and I saved you for last on this because you've got this huge responsibility. You run an entire police organization, and so the decisions you make as to how this is going to roll out ultimately reflect back on you. So when you did this, how did you walk through that? What advice would you give to fellow chiefs, sheriffs, heads of agencies as to how this rolled out for you in terms of project management for something so massive like this?
Yeah, and to further complicate it for us, we're part of a consortium that includes 2 other agencies. So 3 agencies, all on the same CAD RMS system, going through an RFP. So multiply everything by 3. I was the project manager for the San Pablo Police Department. There had to be a project manager in Hercules and Pinole. So a lot of stakeholders, and I would say for me, it was important to create opportunity for these stakeholders to have a voice, to have input, and that is a wide net. And we're small to mid-sized police departments within the consortium, so it can be somewhat controllable. Larger agencies, may be harder, but having the input from frontline workers, the end users that are going to use the system. One thing we learned in implementing technology is this incoming generation of officers want to have a voice. They want to be a part of the decision-making process. How appropriate that is at times is, has to be managed and balanced. So we cast a wide net. We identified, every department has some vocal stakeholders from ranks of officers, sergeants, so on, in your professional staff, on our IT side, communication center. So we cast a wide net as far as involvement in the process. And what I learned was that created a lot of narrative and expectations that I then had to manage on the back end, right? So if 40 people are viewing a demo, and you're going to have 40 different opinions coming out of that demo with the vendor of things they like or don't like. So whatever decision you make, you're going to have people that's automatically a buy-in or don't. But they really want to understand and be a part of the process. So if they understand and trust the process of how we came to these decisions, you're going to have a better odds of success as far as buy-in and implementation once you make that decision. So identifying the right stakeholders, your your voices of dissent in your agency, and making sure that those are the people that are also included in that was pretty critical. So a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings. To Major Ross's point, and everything is PRA for, everything is a public records. So whatever communications we have also has to be managed, because we're located in the Bay Area in California. We can expect a PRA for all communications with all of these vendors and decisions. So managing how these conversations happen and how this narrative internally was the most critical part. And me as the project manager, I had to be neutral, right? Because if I come in and I say, hey, I'm thinking this, or I want this, well, then a lot of voices are going to feel like they're going to be shut down. So I had to be neutral. I had to invite and appreciate all of that input, which did help inform our decision, but ensured better success when it came time to implementation.
Yeah, all three of you, great points on this. I think a theme we're picking up on here certainly is that this is no small task, nor should it be one person's small task. One of those other duties is assigned, as we so frequently would get, but rather this is a collaboration. This is a truly across the board collaboration. So thanks again for that. Let's talk a little bit about vendors. So if you look back on your time, what do you wish that you would have done differently with the chosen vendor? Whomever got the RFP and you started forward with this transition, and that's who you were going to get. What went really well? What could have gone better? And what advice would you give an agency that's about to embark on this project when it comes to, working with vendors specifically? What does that look like for you? And Eric, I want to start with your time back in Chula Vista and in San Diego. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so I already touched on the kind of vendor, sponsor, project manager, and I'll just double down on that. But also, if I think of something else that really stuck out that we didn't realize until at least, 8 months post go live. And so, again, the vendor wasn't pushing back. There was no issues. It's just something that we didn't really have on our radar and observed after the fact. So kind of lesson learned I'd like to share from a vendor standpoint is that by default, I believe many of the vendors tend to be more transactionally oriented, as I mentioned earlier. It's like if you don't ask for it, you don't get it. If you don't, even if it's an omission, obvious omission, that's change order, cost, time, impact to satisfy that requirement and so forth. So I'm going to take interfaces as an example. If you need interfaces to all these connected systems, the CAD or RMS is kind of the heart, if you will, of the body, heart of the PD in terms of feeding everything else that the agency does. And so interfaces are hugely important. And we didn't consider in advance the strategic nature in which we could have thought through what interfaces we need and put that in the statement of work, in the contract and so forth, to save ourselves from a lot of grief after the fact when, we need an interface for this, we didn't realize that. Or now, hey, we brought in this new vendor, we need an interface for them. And it became now going back to the grind with the vendor to get new work created, but just a strategic planning and thinking at the onset would have given us a more flexible interface kind of schema, if you will, to implement, and it would have been set for years to go. So that's kind of one thing I'd impress upon is that certainly the leadership, partnership of your vendor, and I don't even like the word vendor, I like partnership. We are partners in this outcome, but also on the agency's responsibility to really think strategically about, a year, 2 years, 4 years down the road, are you making the right decisions to set yourself up for success and to not have to keep going back to that money tree and back to the change orders that often will take 6 months, fiscal cycles and so forth to get these things in place. That really inhibits your ability to bring on new capabilities to the agency as well and to have everything integrated.
Great, thank you. Chief Bubar, I want to direct the same question to you. When you look at the work you did with the vendor during that transition, what stuck out to you that went really well? What could have been done better? And what advice would you give to other people that are going through the same process?
I think the implementation went well, but the lesson learned was the training. We had a unique situation in which we had to figure out training for 3 different agencies in a short period of time. So I think we had like 8 weeks to train 3 departments, and we kind of shoehorned in a lot. Well, when we do that, a lot of the new features are, you just have to expect it to be underutilized because staff's not going to interpret the value of some of these changes right away. They're going to go to whatever their homeostasis is from their previous system. So if you're going to introduce new systems, new features, new way of doing business, we have to be better prepared to support that transition. And we tried to shoehorn it in because our vendor had limitations on how much training, and the more training, the more dollars it comes down to. All of these are considerations, but I think we would have done a better job of phasing out the training to all 3 agencies to better understand. At the end of the day, staff will figure it out, but the consequence to that is we still have a lot of the features that we paid for that are underutilized, that staff were trained on, 2 years ago, that probably don't realize that exists today. So we would have had a better, longer plan. To Eric's point, you have to look beyond just the initial implementation on how we use this. How are we going to support it 6 months after implementation, a year after implementation? How are we using the system? Because the dollars are spent, and it's a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Major Ross, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so quickly, I guess I'm smiling because of the training aspect that Chief Bubar brought up. As a matter of fact, this week I just finished doing read-off trainings with our members on a refresher training, right? We're about 7 months into our new software. So getting back out there and doing some refresher training was important. And you saw a lot of wide eyes and head nods like, oh, that's how that's done, or, oh, hey. And the funny thing is that training is very important. But one thing that I learned, and I guess being a cop, I can pick on cops, but I honestly don't think, how much effort, regardless of the amount of effort or stuff that you put into training, you're going to still come across the same issues. I think from a managing expectations things, you have to go into this to know that you're going to have deployment issues because your officers or deputies just aren't going to put forth the effort that you want them to put into this to learn the new systems and those things. So, in addition, we did a train the trainer model. In addition to providing training, the vendor came in and provided training. We actually were going live, us and 4 other agencies in our consortium as well. So collectively, we had 2,000 members that we needed to train in a month's time. So it was a heavy lift. We ended up doing training 24/7, 24/5, 5 days a week, to make sure that we hit all schedules and things like that. But in addition, we did recorded videos from our members, not just the vendor. We have a SharePoint site that was put out with resources. We have a report writing guide that goes field by field, step by step, NIBRs, all of that stuff. And despite all of those efforts to push things out there, we still run into the same issues where I don't know how to do that. Well, there's a bunch of resources out there. So one thing is, I think regardless, it is definitely worth the effort to think of that and to put all of those resources out there for the members that do want to use it, because they're going to become those early champions for the software and help others along the way. But you're always going to run into those issues. I got a chuckle out of that because training is definitely a big consideration. As far as what would we have done differently, I think it kind of centers around the data migration and integration from our old data. We had not been reporting to NIBRs in our old system. Some of the agencies that were on that system had not reported, and our vendor at the time, it was an all or none. Although we were ready to report, we had to wait on some of the other agencies that were much smaller and still working on some of their capabilities. So we had yet to report NIBRs. So we had this great idea that we thought we were going to be able to migrate everything over and report NIBRs out of the new system. And that became much more difficult than anyone probably could have ever anticipated. Different vendors different vendors handle data. So that became quite a challenge, and we're continuing to work through that. If I could change one thing, I would have converted data from the operational perspective, but we would have worked to try to report NIBRs out of the old system and not try to do that out of the new system.
Fair. Yeah. All great comments. That the whole relationship and that build, and then the use of it afterwards for something that's just a huge shift for your organization is so very important and vital to how healthy the organization is and how well your women and men go out and do the jobs they need to do. So thanks for that. I just want to remind our audience really quickly, we do have, don't forget about the chat and the Q&A feature. We do have a few questions already in. So if there's something you'd like to ask based on what you've heard or maybe not heard, feel free to throw that into the Q&A as well. Major, you just said this a minute ago, and I want to start this question off with Chief Bubar in particular. When we talk about something like a CAD RMS transition, something that we don't always consider is what happens to the data that you had until this point. So you have legacy, soon to be legacy systems, older systems within your organization. But that data still within those systems is still important. It's still historically incredibly significant to how your organization functions, who you've dealt with over the years, all the things that it doesn't go away just because you have a new system. You don't wipe the slate clean. So you not only want to access it, but you want to be able to use it in a meaningful way. So Chief, I want to start with you on this one. How did you manage that challenge, that we'll call it data migration, to just sort of loop it into that category a little bit? And how well did that CAD RMS vendor fulfill that need? Or did you maybe have to look elsewhere to get that done? Chief?
Yeah. So again, I'm just a cop. So to me, the solution is very simple. I want all the data. I want all the data. I want all of it is important. All of it is relevant, and it all should exist in this new system. So just press a button, and we want it. Well, come to find out, that's a much harder task, and quite frankly, an expensive task to bring over. Something like, for us, we had this legacy system. We were coming from another consortium, so there was no schema or data dictionary. So the way it's explained to me, I had a pot of a bunch of ones and zeros. And so to bring all that over and to make it usable in this new system was going to require a lot of work. And every piece of data that we wanted to bring over increased the price of that contract several fold. So we had to collectively come together and identify what is it that we actually need to exist for a critical incident response right now through our CAD RMS system. What information needs to be seamless within this, things like incidents, locations, etc. And because we were fortunate, because we had a relationship with Peregrine, if I go back to my buffet analogy, Peregrine was like a dietary supplement that filled the gaps for us, right? I changed my diet, and but I still had this supplement that could help me to make sure that I had a complete diet. So because we were able to, have this replicated server that had a lot of this data already integrated, we could still keep that and use that and have that be accessible and still support real-time response and investigations, and all that could still live. But what we had to migrate over and transition was actually a much smaller footprint, because we had a system like Peregrine. And I would suggest, offer to the group, no matter what RMS system you pick, there's going to be limitations, and we're now bringing in different technology across the board. Aside from our legacy data that we wanted to migrate over, I'm bringing in, we have close to 400 situational awareness cameras and license plate reader cameras. We have 100% gunshot detection software. We have drone as a first responder now. We have body cam. We have evidence.com. We have all these technology features that are your RMS system may or may not have a relationship with, but is still relevant. So whatever system we pick, we should be looking at how software can supplement our use of this RMS system, because it's not going to be all inclusive. These vendors are creating systems that have to speak to the lowest common denominator for all these agencies. It's not built with your unique agency. So again, I go back to, what is a priority for you? What is your workflow? What is important? And how's this system going to help and support that?
Great. Thanks, Chief. Major, when it comes to data migration, one system to the new system, that's not an easy task. It's not like flipping a switch. So how did you manage and navigate that process? And was it with the vendor? Was it with an external source? What did that look like for your organization?
Yeah, so we actually approached it from the opposite end of Chief Bubar with, I want to bring absolutely nothing over and start with a clean slate. And that was based on how horribly wrong our last data migration went, that I don't think in 15 years we ever truly recovered from. And really, I came to the realization that there is never going to be a perfect data migration. It is impossible when you take two different technology stacks and different data sets and how the language that they've written that in. It's just really impossible. So you do have to ask yourself, what is it that you truly need? What do you need to sustain operations, as the chief said, and go with that. And then you do look at other solutions, especially from the operational standpoint. No more law enforcement agencies or members just looking at their RMS for a data set. So your RMS is not the whole source anymore. It is part of it. So you need to plug that in to another solution that is going to be best operational for your members in the field. What we did end up realizing, though, is a couple things to keep in mind, right? And how much data do you bring? First is, how often are your officers going to be needing to supplement reports from the old system? And what time frame does that look like? And if it's not in your new system, how do you have a process in place to handle that? The other thing is your public records folks. How are they going to facilitate the continued public records requests for the old system? Are you going to continue to have access to your old legacy data? And in what form is really important, and will that be sufficient? So it really is, what are your operational needs is going to drive how much data you want to bring over. If it truly is a fear of, I want to have all this, information, know these people's involvements and things like that, I promise you, your name indexes are going to populate much faster than you think. Cleaning data having good clean data is really important. I think a lot of people underestimate that, and data migration is the number one way to make you have dirty data. So be careful, be diligent. It took a lot of work. It was so our connection is and directly answer your question, Doug. Peregrine actually was brought in by our vendor, not even by our agency. They were brought in by our vendor to handle our data migration, and it was beneficial having a consultant, if you will, that was an expert in data, that knew all of that stuff, that could help us walk through those issues. And when we were going down a path to say, I don't know that you really want to do that, have you thought about this? And then it really was a lot of long nights. So we were up from a good team perspective, we were working till 1 or 2 in the morning, just testing data and refiguring out workflows. And a lot of what you need from the law enforcement agency is the perspective. A lot of the questions we got asked from the vendor is, why are we seeing all this different type of data input here in this field? How is it actually done? What's going through the minds of your officers in the field when they're typing this data in? That helped the technical folks understand workflow better, and that was really important.
You're great. Eric, I want to ask you, and we're coming up on our time, and we have some great questions already, so I want to get to one of the questions before we close out. But Eric, maybe a couple final thoughts on that piece from a tech side, just real briefly.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. But just building on Chief Ubar and Major Ross, kind of stole my thunder here. That the point I'd like to make and leave everyone with is that data migration from a legacy system to a new system without compromise is a fallacy. It's not a reality for some of the reasons that Major Ross pointed out. But basically, you have a certain shape of your data attributes and how you implement it. For example, one CAD system or RMS system at one agency, you can have that same product at another agency, and it will have an entirely different shape because their practices are different. The decisions they made on how they want their input fields, everything is different at that data management layer, what goes into the CAD system or RMS system. Therefore, what's being stored is different. Now, you try to take that and shove it from one database directly in the other database, bypassing the new data management layer. You're basically bypassing all the controls, all the automations that would link that data and make it relevant, usable, and discoverable. And so that just eliminates, first of all, you're not going to get it all over there because it doesn't fit, frankly. So you can only put over what fits, and then it won't be as usable in the new system. So a solution where you basically say, I'm going to bring in my old system and my new data through a platform like Peregrine, where you can get access to it and not have any daylight between what's new, what's old, when was the cutover. On this case or that case, you won't be able to tell because that was the purpose. That's the outcome of that kind of a platform, which is not the intended goal of a CAD or RMS system to achieve that goal, that solution. So I'll just kind of cut off there so we have time for some questions.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Super helpful on everything there. One of our questions, and I really like this question because when we think of public safety, it's not just police, right? We've got our partners in fire and EMS and 911 centers, dispatch, emergency management, and so one of the questions actually stems from that. So thanks to the person that asked this. What would you, if you're in charge of this transition within your city, your organization, your county, whatever it happens to be, how do you bring on board folks from these other public safety entities to best ensure that the transition goes well for everybody if that system serves all these other public safety organizations? Like what does that look like to you? What have you learned from those types of instances where you've had other partners, public safety partners at the table, and how has that gone? Maybe a couple quick points on that one before we start to close things out a bit. I'll start with actually Major Ross this time.
So I think that starts long before this process, right? It's developing those strong relationships with all of your public safety partners. So when we initially went out to look, we invited fire rescue because we share the same CAD. So we were looking together and it actually was listening to them of how under the CAD, fire rescue is the primary utilizer really of a CAD. We were law enforcement, such a small piece. And when they said it was too much of a heavy lift for them to move to that, we were like, you know what, you're right, let's leave it. And we pivoted to just look for an RMS. So great relationships, open lines of communication, and compromise, right? You have to realize you're not the only the fish out there.
Chief?
Yeah, I would just add that I did not appreciate what independent systems that are fire and dispatch. We have a PSAP as part of our consortium, and there's a lot of third-party systems that they use that we did not know if they integrated or would work with this transition. So part way we had to initiate those conversations and learn some of those lessons and to see what the impact was. So being inclusive of them early on is key.
Yeah. Thanks, Chief. And Eric, maybe you can touch on this too, but also throw in the concept of like jail management systems too. We talked CAD RMS, but what about JMS on top of that?
Yeah, good call out for that. So for Chula Vista, for example, they only use CAD and RMS for law enforcement, not fire or EMS. So those were always kind of transitioned to other agencies that handled those. So the experience was really with 911 or dispatch. I
think we locked up there a little bit.
That's the one thing about technology is
yeah, I know, right? We should know some tech companies or something. I think, and from my own experience working collaboratively with local organizations. I think one thing we're learning very quickly, and I think it's great to reinforce that during this call and this discussion, is that the more we include our partners, no matter what their role is, on the front end as opposed to on the back end, asking questions after something's done is just never really going to go well. But getting people on the front end to understand those challenges, those problems, really can be helpful up front. So I appreciate that perspective for sure. We're up against time, so this has been great. I want to thank each one of you for being on board for this today. I know super busy schedules, but your experiences in this field are really, really helpful to all of us. So I really want to thank the panelists for being here today. Chief, Major, Eric, thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, as we close this out, a lot of information, right? There's a lot of things happening with this. Again, this is no small task. A CAD RMS transition has never been called inexpensive or easy, and rightfully so, because quite frankly, these are massive changes within your organization that are going to last for quite some time, not just years, but maybe even a decade or longer. So when you make that decision to do it, it's got to be done right, and it's got to be done preferably right the first time. It's never easy to do, but hopefully some of the tips that were brought up today can be really super helpful for all of you that have paid attention. One thing we would offer from Peregrine is that if you want more tips to kind of plan this smooth CAD RMS transition, is we have a blog. There's a link that's provided on this webinar. We'd invite you to check it out and take a look at it to get some more ideas, to really look at what can be helpful in these types of transitions as you consider where you are currently or where you want to go with the CAD RMS transition. And additionally, we're going to be sharing the link. Really watch your email for this with an on-demand recording this webinar, because there may be people in your organization or neighboring organizations that you want to share this with because you're working in that consortium or a group effort to do things. So the more information you have, the better off. So we appreciate your time. We're really thankful you took the time out of your most likely very busy days to be with us today. And if you have questions, reach out, let us know. We're always happy to be there. And thanks for what you do. Have a great day, everybody.